Hello, this is Angie Yingst, and you're listening to Centered, grounded conversations about the metaphysical. Hello, it's Angie Yingst, and welcome to Centered. I wanted to talk about this episode because when I started this podcast, it was really about having conversations with people and bridging, some of the divide, not divide between others, but, just getting a lot of different perspectives. And so I was going to have healers and therapists and artists and storytellers and troublemakers and psychics and political people and non-political people and shamanic practitioners and my friends, the people that I get to have in my life all the time. And part of that's because I love conversation and connection, and I feel the heart of healing is between connection, and we do so much work when we're healing in community. And 2021 kicked my butt a little bit, and I kind of thought, "Oh, 2022 is gonna be a nice reprieve." No, it's also kicked my butt. So, I had been doing more solo-centered episodes, and I would love to start bringing in some guests, um, as I'm feeling better and stuff. So, I haven't really talked a lot about what I had been going through, but I had a breast cancer diagnosis, a double mastectomy, then I got infection and COVID, and I had really severe anemia, and that led to a diagnosis of endometrial cancer and a total hysterectomy in 2022. So let's just say I haven't been able to get my schedules aligned with other people because I always need naps. And I'm still healing, but I feel really good. So thanks for asking. But Kira Pauls was going to actually start to co-host in 2022, and we just kind of couldn't get it together. Well, I shouldn't say that. I couldn't get it together. And I had to let go of some stuff, and podcast was one of them. So I started picking up this year, just doing my monthly readings here and essays and things like that. So I would really like this to be a place where we not only do those kind of essays and me answering questions, which is one of my passions, but also having more conversations. And Kara is one that I love to have conversations with because she's so interesting and has a really wonderful perspective on things. Plus, she's a really good friend of mine, and we have easy conversations, so that's really nice. So, this podcast we did on a whim. We set a time, but we didn't really have an agenda. And we ended up talking mostly about the decision of Roe v. Wade. So, we are both pro choice and coming from that point of view as leftists. And I just want you to know that because if you're triggered by that kind of talk, then you may want to skip this episode. But what we're really talking about is the lovers as the theme for the year and the way that's interacted and shown up with things like this decision of Roe v. Wade. Kira and I also pulled some tarot cards and went on a lot of tangents. And I should call this the journey of neurodivergence in talking about one thing. So we have lots of tangents. I actually split up into an extra bonus episode that I got to figure out how I'm going to put up there, but maybe it'll be next week of both of us who had watched The Deep End, which is the documentary about Teal Swan. So that's coming at some point, but I didn't put it into this episode. So if you do have a question for me, which I love to answer on any topic, I have a record button on my anchor page if you want your voice on, or you can just email me a question at Angie@themoonandstone.com, or if you follow me on Facebook, I often post them there. So a little bit about Kara. Kara is a social worker, a therapist, and she has training in archetypal analysis from a Jungian perspective. In fact, she just got accepted into the Jungian Institute. So I'm really excited for her. She's a certified shadow retrieval facilitator. She's also trained as a yoga teacher and a massage therapist. She is a practicing witch and druid. And you can find Kira online at awintarot.com. AWENTAROT.com. And I hope you enjoy today's discussion. So it was interesting to think about this year being a lover's year
Yeah.
and being about choice. Like that had not occurred to me
That's
until
so
you said it. I was
funny.
like, oh my gosh, that's so true. And
Yeah, that's
especially the dichotomy between men and, male and female.
absolutely. Yeah, it's like it is really interesting because like at a time where it's like I feel like in terms of the gender binary, like there's finally been like talks about it and about this idea of like, non-binary identities and stuff like that. And it's just funny that it's like, of course, like we know that it makes a lot of sense that at the time that that's happening, there would also be this like surge of like extremism of like keep the binary. And yeah, it is interesting that with the Supreme Court decision about Roe v. Wade and all these other things, it's like that's kind of the extreme issue that's being brought up here.
Yeah, it is
Yeah.
really interesting. Did you hear that professor talk to the senator? And aside here, I'm talking about Stanford law professor Kiara Bridges talking to Josh Hawley. Yeah, it was interesting. He kind of like confronted her and said, you keep saying people who give birth.
Uh-huh.
And he's like, who do you mean? You mean women? And then she was like, well, some women can give birth and some women can't give birth. And then she
Yeah.
went on to really like, oh, it was just so good. And she just told him, like, your question was transphobic, which was,
Right.
I was like, yay, someone's saying this.
Well, and that is the thing. Yeah, that's the thing that is really interesting about that is like you have the people realizing that like, it's not just women who give birth and saying that and saying like it's people who have uteruses and to like ignore the fact that there's other people besides women who have uteruses is transphobic and even
Yeah.
as she said, like violent.
Yes.
It is funny though, because in the mind of like the conservatives, like they're oppressing who they're oppressing because they view them as women.
Yes. Yeah.
Like ultimately, yeah, it's like they're just lumping everyone into that category and that category deserves to be oppressed.
And I mean, one of the ways that trans people have been most oppressed is sexual violence.
Absolutely.
Just like
Absolutely.
we have to do this for their own good,
Absolutely.
marrying them off and, doing all kinds of crazy shit. I mean,
Yeah.
as a mom of a non-binary kid, I feel like that's has to be their choice, period, because
Right.
I don't know what kind of violence may come to her, and she goes by
Exactly.
they, she. So
Yeah.
that's why I use it interchangeably. But
Yeah.
I want her to make a decision on her body based on wanting a child if they ever do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
It's scary. The interesting thing, though, which I don't know if I ever had really thought about it until this conversation came up, but the way the lovers is set up, right? You have the, Eve on one side and Adam on the other, if that's how you see it. And then you have like the archangel above, who is completely androgynous.
Yes.
Do you know what I
Yes.
mean? Like, and it's
Yeah.
funny when people sort of put that masculine, like, oh, he, but I'm like, why does he have a penis? Like, why do the archangels have penises? Do they?
Right. Like, do they? Does it matter if they do? Yeah, exactly. Right.
Probably
And
they don't need any functional, like, why would they have a penis? To have sex or to urinate, which they're not going
right.
to do. I hate to say it that way, but like, really.
Well, and even like the whole idea too that it's like, the biblical description of angels is like that like eye with like all the bunch of eyes around it and
Yes.
the
Yeah.
wings. And it's like this, does that have a penis or a vagina? Like
Yeah. I mean, they're fucking terrifying.
Right.
They're described.
Yeah.
Like, we can't even look at them. They're so bright.
Right,
Just
exactly.
lights.
Well, and The other thing too, I was like thinking about with the lovers being our card of the year, and so then like automatically like in the shadow, like the devil is kind of there as well. It's
Yeah.
like I had the word I was trying to remember that I was trying to tell you about in my
Yeah.
one message that was completely like vague and you had no idea what I'm talking about, I'm sure. It was acolyte.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and so it's like that's the thing that's really interesting about I think how we're feeling in the United States, at least about this year, is like this idea that like in the lovers and the devil, the two people are like at the will and mercy of these other figures, the
Yeah.
angel or the devil.
Absolutely.
And it's like this year, it's like it's just like what happened, what's happening with the Supreme Court. It's like I didn't get to decide any part of this. It just happened. Just some authority came in and did it.
Yeah. Which is interesting because it's like it mirrors so many of the cards, that
Yeah.
whole tiered, like even the Hierophant has the two acolytes below,
Yeah.
the lovers, and then Justice kind of does too.
Yeah. And even
Um,
one I was thinking about, like the moon, not exactly, but
yeah.
kind of with the dog and coyote and
And of course, the
pillars.
tower does because you have the lightning bolt coming from outer
Yes.
space. I've been thinking so much about like the fool's journey, and like the way the cards are set up, where you have like the growth there. So it's interesting to come from like the Hierophant, where there's a person who's translating from God, right, to the
Right.
acolytes. And then the lovers is like, oh, we're talking directly to an angel. And
Right.
then it goes into the Chariot, which is a self-driven card.
Yes.
It
Yes. Which
doesn't really
that,
have any God mention in it besides like the mysteries, basically the mystery of the Sphinx, the astrology. But
well, and that'll be interesting for next year, if like, I mean, to me, like the themes of the devil and the lovers are just like really apparent this
yeah,
year in the United States. But like, I am definitely curious about what the chariot and the tower is going to look like here. Because like you said, the self-driven thing I think is really important. Like if there were to be some kind of revolution of some kind where the structures as we know them are torn down in some kind of way, like the idea that it would be self-driven or driven by the people, then it would be, that would go with that. But at the same time, there's also like just absolute catastrophe with the tower too. It might not be something we want or
yeah.
plan on, but
I mean, I kind of wonder if it isn't like our individualism that really is like the downfall in a lot of ways. Like we need our freedom so much that we're willing to sacrifice children in schools to have
yeah,
a gun, a certain kind of gun.
right,
It's kind of how could we avoid
right.
total
Like
catastrophe?
we know it's about to happen.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
just the amount
that's
of mass shootings and all that stuff this year.
yeah, no,
Do you remember when we
absolutely.
started this podcast like in 2020 and we were talking about Black Lives Matter? You know what I mean? Like we were talking about a different landscape altogether 2 years ago.
Yeah, we were. Yeah, it was very different.
This landscape is, I don't know,
Yeah.
it is white supremacy with its claws and everything.
Right. It's completely out in the open now at this point.
Yeah.
There's no denying it. Well, and the thing too about the tower for next year is it's like it's one of those things where I always feel like the tower has a little bit of that energy of like, even though you act like you're surprised, like you're not entirely surprised. Like the
Right.
foundation had cracks and you were actively avoiding paying attention to them.
Yeah. And that's what I mean about the fool's journey. Like it comes after the devil.
Yeah.
So, like,
Yeah.
you have been attached unhealthily to things that aren't good, like the devil, like you are chained
Exactly.
there. So, how else is
Exactly.
this going to come down? But
exactly. Well, yeah, I mean, it is interesting because I even was thinking about because like right now personally, I'm in a moon and hermit year.
yeah,
So last year was the star and strength, and then the year before that was my tower year. And like, yeah, that's the thing about that is the thing about the tower. Like, although of course I have some nerves about what it could mean for us, like ultimately we know that it's going to be for the best. Like my tower year was brutal. I don't want to experience it
no,
again. Like it sucked. That being said, I learned lessons that completely changed me as a person. And at this point in time, like my life is better for it, which again, like talking about even like trauma or bad circumstances in that way, it kind of sucks, but it is true. I mean,
yeah,
unfortunately, in some cases, it is true.
yeah. You never want to wish trauma on somebody, but it actually like does propel you to growth.
It does.
or
Like,
or the complete opposite, right?
well, yeah, and I mean, it's like that's what I talk to clients about, like even with like the relationship between the emperor and death is like the emperor becomes the emperor because he like encounters death multiple times and he
Yes.
overcomes it and he triumphs. And so it's like
Yeah.
encountering that death, encountering that tower is what matures us into our emperor that we can be. So
Yeah. Tower
yeah.
years are hard.
Yeah.
I can still remember it led to everything.
Well, when was yours?
2017, I think.
Okay, because I thought I remembered, like, I was pretty sure I knew you and like during
Yeah.
your tower year and
Yeah.
everything. Yeah.
I think it might have been 2018. I can't remember.
So what year are you in now?
Justice.
You have the twos right now. No.
Yeah.
Even the high priestess, like
I mean,
being there and judgment, like,
it's a hard one, the high
yeah,
priestess.
yeah,
Because you want to embody it, but there's all this like physical stuff that's come up for me this year
yes,
that has been kind of like the battle between the spiritual and the physical. It's like
right,
the high priestess exists in this place outside of human
yes,
concerns. Like you don't even know if she eats or talks, we
right,
so what happens when you have to do those things?
yeah,
And
yeah,
you and I had, I mean, the interesting part of not being able to do this podcast was that we both were dealing with physical issues.
right, exactly,
And that was really challenging for me to just be like, oh, I have to slow down.
right,
I have to balance the scales. I have to,
exactly.
be okay with everything. So
Yeah. Well, and that is really interesting to think about it being the justice year for you and in that way of balancing out
yeah.
something. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, 11 is such an interesting number because it's supposed to be like this master number.
It's
But
like a
then,
gateway.
yeah, but then justice is the card. And that
Right.
feels so, I don't know, esoteric kind of or something.
Yeah.
Wasn't justice the 8 card?
Well, yeah, I think that's the thing. And I think it's even, is it the Marseillaise deck that it's switched and some other decks it's switched
Is it
where,
switched with strength?
yeah, strength and
Yeah.
justice switch sometimes.
Yeah.
Because that does number 8 makes a lot of sense for justice, honestly, but 11 makes less sense for me with strength.
Yeah. Yeah. Strength is my life path card though.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Which has always been a fickle bitch for me
Right. I could
because I'm
imagine.
always like, oh, people are like, you're so strong. And then they're like, they don't check in. Like, and I'm like, no, I'm
Right.
actually a delicate flower, but
Right. Like
I've
I
had to be strong and hypervigilant all the time. So
exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean that's the thing with that strength card that lady in the card looks a little too peaceful.
I know.
She's like, I got it, it's all good.
Yeah. But like, how many times did she get bit before she tamed
Right,
that
I
freaking
know.
lion?
Seriously.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm curious. I've been curious how justice is going to show up here, but I think also like the Supreme Court and all the stuff that's happening feels like that imbalance of justice, where I'm just like, how much more are you going to take and be like in your home, not fighting?
Right, exactly. I know.
Like, I feel like they're just radicalizing me at
Yes.
age almost 50.
Right. Well, yeah, and I mean, I think that's well, that'll be good preparation for the towering year. That is
Yeah.
radical change, as radical as it gets.
Oh man. It's interesting. Like, how have you noticed, like, with your clients and how they're dealing with this year? Like, do you think it's been better than last year? Because I've noticed my
Mm,
clients are kind of like, I almost felt like there was this weird pause button in 2021, and people were all in this really stuck place.
right. Yes.
And this year, all the shit is going down. Like, people are losing their jobs, they're losing their marriages, they're like, everything's shifting. It's almost like it is a tower year. I know
Yeah. Well,
it's
and
not, but
I mean that makes a lot of sense though, even devil and lovers
yeah,
themes, especially
yeah,
marriages. um
yeah,
but yeah, like I would say I've noticed kind of like a similar thing. I think that last year the energy seemed a lot more stagnant.
yeah.
And this year it's moving forward, and with my clients and even with me personally, it's like it could be good, bad, and different, but it's moving.
Yeah, yeah,
um
exactly.
which is kind of interesting because again, with next year being the chariot, I would imagine that that energy might pick up
Just
even more,
yeah,
yeah, for the
be
collective.
swifter.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting because I always consider the chair a really masculine card.
Yeah.
Do you?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because like I do see it that way, and like even though it's associated with cancer, like
Yeah.
to me it's like since it's associated with cancer, there's so much that reminds me of like Poseidon, the god, and he rides a chariot, and so it's like to me it's like it feels very like King of Cups if
Yes.
it's water. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I always use a chariot as like a virility card too.
Oh, really? That's a
Yeah.
great idea. Well, I mean, the chariot, he is a go-getter. It kind of like
Yeah.
goes, goes with
I'm
that
always like,
outward
you're
moving
having
energy.
good sex when I get this card.
Really? Sometimes the tower can be that too.
Yes. Yeah. It's literally.
Should we do a reading?
Sure.
Okay.
What cards do you have?
I have actually the only ones I have sitting here like right by me are the Mystical Medleys
What
vintage
is that? That's
cartoon
so cute.
tarot. It is, it's the most adorable thing ever. It's so cute.
That is cute. I just have my Rider Waite, but I have so many behind me. I could get any deck if you want. How should we do this?
We could pick a topic and then maybe each of us pull one card and see what we
Yeah,
get
that
and draw
sounds
the
good.
parallels. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So what should we read on?
Since we were talking about Roe v. Wade, do you want to
Yeah, we
do
can
that?
Supreme Court.
Oh, Kyra.
Oh God, what did you get?
Death.
I got the devil.
Oh my gosh. Holy.
Oh my
Oh my
God.
God. I got
That's so
death.
scary.
I know.
Oh wow.
It's
So
funny
now
that
we
you
have
got
to
the
draw the
devil.
parallels between death and devil.
I mean,
It's
it's not
brutal.
surprising. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And I pulled the death. It was kind of upside down, like I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, so I just think it's like this massive resistance to change, obviously. And then
That
the
makes a lot of
literal death,
sense.
like women going through this process of understanding, like, what does death mean for us? What does this mean? The death of our freedom of choice.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then when you say death of the freedom of choice and you have the devil, there's no choice.
Yeah. We're
Yeah.
chained to
Yeah.
someone
We're
who has,
chained to this higher authority that can just do whatever it wants.
and is a mask, like masks
Yeah,
itself. It looks like one
exactly.
thing.
Yeah, like we're convinced that it has all the power and everything.
I know
Doesn't
sometimes
really.
I wish the devil would look like a televangelist or something like that.
Right, exactly. Oh my gosh, that's a great idea. Or like, yeah, like Wizard of Oz or
Yeah.
something like that. Like, yeah, because really it's this blown up image. It's not, it's like I would get the devil a lot when I would ask about, like different things like debts, right?
Yeah.
And it's like I get the devil a lot because that makes perfect sense. It's like debt is something that causes a lot of people to feel very, very, very anxious and very uncertain and afraid. At the same time, though, it's one of these things that it's like it's both real and not actually real. And
Yeah.
and a lot of times there are even like even in the way that we do consider it real, like there are ways out of it that you don't necessarily see when you're in the oh god it rules my life sort of
Yeah.
mode. So yeah, that's kind of like the Supreme Court too, where it's like, I remember I had thought about like after the decision about like Roe v. Wade was made, I was like, well, how about we all just don't follow that law? How about we all just don't follow the rules?
Yeah.
Like, like if there are any states that ban abortion, like, well, the doctors just not listen to the
Yeah.
state. Like, I don't know. Like, what are they gonna do? Arrest everybody? At a certain
Yeah.
point, like, I mean, not that I'm saying that that would be the best way to handle it or anything, but there is like this idea that like yeah, they came down and they repealed Roe v. Wade, and so that gives the states to decide whatever, and it feels like there's this big authority that has all this control, but also at the same time they could just as easily be completely not real and not relevant to us tomorrow if we wanted it to be that case.
Yeah. Like, why are we chaining ourselves to this false prophet?
Right, like we don't have to follow, we can decide that they're not our leader.
Yeah. I saw a couple lawyers actually on like TikTok or whatever doing like, if you were ever like if you were ever like on a jury, for example, where you were
Oh yeah,
hearing like an abortion case, you can just say, I refuse to like think of this as a crime,
right, absolutely,
which
absolutely,
is
yeah.
interesting.
And all it takes is one person on that
Yeah.
jury and done.
It's invalidated. But it's
Right,
interesting too to like have to reckon with death around
yeah,
this because it's like what we talked about. Didn't we do an episode on death
I
where we
think
talked
so.
about it being like the literal death? You have to go through that whole process of letting go of an idea. And the
Right,
idea here is that we had equal rights and people want us to have, men want us to have equal rights, which I believe some men do, but
yeah.
clearly not all of them.
Yeah, clear. Yeah, no, absolutely.
I think it's interesting too that when we talk about like that mask that the devil wears, like we don't often chain ourselves to something that's so ugly as the
Mhm.
devil. We chain ourselves to something we think is going to help us. It kind of reminds me of the way, did you read The Handmaid's Tale?
Mhm.
How Serena Joy like helps create this basically land where all of her freedoms are going to be taken away. And the only reason she does that is because she thinks she's going to be immune. Like, because she's a wife, she's not going to have to abide by the same laws. And then she
Right.
realizes, oh shit, they're going to cut off my finger for reading.
Well, and
Right.
that's what I was thinking when you were talking about death too, is even just like, we just had the 4th of July, right? And it's like there like this country, although it was founded on colonization and slavery and the exploitation of many people. I mean, at this point, more than half of the population is in the category of oppressed in some
Yes.
sort of way.
Yep.
Like that, all of that being said, like people do have genuine like feelings and attachments to this country. And there is like a level of like, you know, I do understand and sympathize in some ways. And even for me, I can say that it would be strange if, like, you know, the United States of America were to like no longer be in existence or something like that. If something like that were to happen, which I don't necessarily believe that, but like this idea that it's like this country and these ideals that we grew up with are like not, just not there anymore. Like I think that that's one of the big issues here, is like it's like the parent that people were idealizing and they just like love so much, and oh my gosh, I just want daddy to love me too just as
Yeah.
much as I love him. And then daddy does something absolutely awful and you're
Yeah.
what do I do here, because I love him so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that frustrates me is, you know, that those of us who criticize the United States and some of these policies, you know, we actually kind of believe in America. Otherwise, we would
Right.
just like be like, oh, it's lost forever, you know, but we believe in those ideals and want them to actually be put into practice. We don't want them to be, you know, ignored anymore. We want actual freedom for ourselves. So
Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. It's like the people who are the most critical of the country are the ones who are like caring about personal freedoms and
yeah,
life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
yes, exactly.
Um, yeah. And
What
so,
did we
yeah,
determine? What is the card of America? Did we figure out the life path of America card?
did
Didn't you do
we?
that the one time? Do we think of it as July 4th, 1776? Is that
Yeah, we could say that. So let's see. So that's 14. So it's Temperance and the Hierophant, which that's mine too. Interesting.
that is interesting.
Yeah. Which
Makes sense.
it does make sense. I actually find that a little bit comforting in some strange ways, like in the
Yeah.
sense of like there is temperance there.
Well, we
Which
were
is
founded on Puritanism.
right,
So that
right.
temperance makes a lot of sense too, with just this idea of like we have to work hard and be pure and all that kind of weird
Absolutely.
stuff.
Yeah.
You make of temperance between death and the devil.
Well, yeah, I mean that's funny with temperance like standing there between them.
I always think of
Um,
it as death. Like
yeah,
I think of it as like the place after the hard, painful death part where you're like,
right,
you see the light and you're like, you
right.
get to decide to stay here and reprioritize your life and balance everything. But
Yeah,
like the devil is the other side of it. It's like heaven and hell, you know,
yeah,
which do you get to decide to live back into?
yeah. No, absolutely. And it's like it is interesting that the US has temperance as the card, because it's like that balancing out of the extremes.
Yeah.
Um or taking the two extremes and alchemizing them.
Mm-hmm. We are so polarized right now.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
two party system is really sucky. And, you know, of course, that goes back to the lovers too.
Yeah. Exactly.
But what I think is interesting is if you look at it from the Hierophant point of view, like you have these two paths, but the ultimate authority is one, they still feed the same beast. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
They still
Yep.
feed the Pope, not like they're
Hmm.
radical or anything.
I feel like we should do another read on something.
Okay, maybe we should ask about our response, like how we should,
Oh yeah, I like that. What, yeah.
you know, how
Oh.
is the universe asking us to show up right now? What did you get?
I got the 9 of Pentacles. What did you get?
The Hangman.
What? Okay, it's weird because the energies are not that different, strangely enough.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, the only difference though is like they're both just kind of hanging out, but mine's very comfortably hanging out, and yours is
yeah,
very uncomfortably hanging out.
yeah. I mean, the Hangman, I think, is just like it's asking you to get a different perspective. Like it's asking
Yeah,
you not to stay in your bubble
right.
and not to like just follow the news that you are used to, not just talk to people that agree with you, to talk to
Right.
everyone.
Expand your consciousness.
Yeah.
But
It
like in a
is.
real way.
Yeah. What do you think the 9 is?
Yeah. So, I mean, the way that I'm taking it, and it sound like it's so, I feel so like cliche saying it.
Just say
Um,
it.
but I think
That's
it is that idea of like self-care or whatever, in the sense of like, if we're going to be able to actually like speak up and like feel a little bit uncomfortable like the hanged man does in order to gain a new perspective and all those different things, like we're gonna have to make sure that we are filling our own cups, taking
yeah,
things slowly, taking care of ourselves, resting a lot. um
absolutely.
yeah, yeah,
There's something about the 9 that I feel is they know who they are
yes,
too. So it's like the idea of like, if I read another perspective,
yeah,
it's not going to necessarily change your mind and change who you are.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if you're comfortable with who you are, then talking to another person and asking them, why do you think that way?
Absolutely.
I have to say,
Absolutely.
I did that with my husband the other day.
Oh yeah.
I said, why do you think this way? And he's like, why are you interrogating me? I'm like, that was supposed to be a nice, like,
I was like a nice question.
question, like a compassionate question. But then we had a conversation, but it was kind of funny because I was like, he's so suspicious of me being like, why do you believe this thing that you believe? You know?
Yeah. That's so funny. But no, I mean that is like the sort of question to be asking, because like, like just leaving it at, well, these people suck and the way that they view the world sucks and
Yeah.
they're evil bad people. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Like that's
Exactly.
not gonna get us anywhere.
No.
And I'm not saying that we have to sympathize with Nazis or anything, but I don't really know what that looks like because I'm still working on that, not like getting
Well,
away from like this
yeah.
polarization of seeing it as evil, but yeah.
Yeah. I kind of like the idea of like when you actually talk to people, you end up liking them. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Even if they are completely different than you and believe different things, that, we have to kind of stop this idea that we have a binary, like it's them or us.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
in the same token, how do you start that conversation?
Right.
That's a hard one. Like everything I've read about this or I've heard about this have always been from like comedians or celebrities are like, I'm talking to conservative people. And
Mhm.
look at me, aren't I a great person because I'm talking to like rednecks or something like that? And it's like, yeah, but I live with these people 100% of the time. So I
Right.
am always interacting with people who think differently than me.
Absolutely.
So it's just not one experience we get to have. We live in a conservative area.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Right. Yeah. And I mean that is a really good point too. It's like I think that that is why like it's been hard to really figure out how to work with some of this, because it's like, based on like the sort of content that we both kind of consume around, politics and everything like that, like our leanings would be one way and how we even
yeah,
like view these people would be one way, but then we go out in the world and we're actually interacting with them, and it actually is something where you see it's like we literally can't just slice and dice this country. Like I remember when I was in school and so we're talking about the Civil War and stuff like that, and I would always like say that, like, because I was young and naive and whatever, I was like, they should have just let the South split off and said good fucking riddance.
yeah,
But like I understand more now. Like I
yeah,
yeah, I get it more now. And the country was way less connected back then than it is
Yeah.
now. So yeah,
I kind of wonder if that's going to happen at some point,
I know, me too.
like
If
if
it
there's
might,
going to be like a North United States and a South United States, or
yeah,
something.
absolutely, absolutely,
North
yeah,
States and South States. Not because I don't think there'll be another like violent civil war, but I do think
no,
that it's getting to be that the differences are, you can kind of split them up.
absolutely, yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting. When we look at the hangman, there's something about that experience of having to like examine your own beliefs
hmm,
that is the work. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like, just like, why do I think the way I think?
right.
Why does the other person think the way they think?
Yeah. Yeah, well, and it's interesting too because with the hanged man, thinking about people's rights being taken away, like the ways in which many people are kind of martyred in this situation. Um, but it's interesting though because with the hanged man, it's like, and how are we going to use that martyring? It's like, are
Yeah.
we going to be a martyr and just take it, or is there something that can be, there's some kind of lesson or information that we can get from this experience?
Yeah. Yeah. Because the enlightenment is about being upside down, it doesn't
Yeah.
happen when he's upright.
Yeah.
I said to someone who was conservative, um, it's hard for me to wake up one day and have less rights than the day before. And that person was like, you don't have less rights. And I was like, yes, I do, and he
Yes.
and he was like, you live in a state where abortion's still legal today.
Right now.
And that's what I said. I was like, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, that was literally our only backup was the Supreme Court ruling of Roe v. Wade.
Right.
That was it. That's all we had to protect us seeking medical care if we needed it.
Right.
But it was a frustrating argument. It's like, well, it isn't actually just about me. I'm not just angry for me. I'm angry for all those women in all those states where it is suddenly illegal.
Right. I mean, and that's the thing that blows my mind anytime you talk to certain
Yeah.
types of folks is that sometimes you hear that it's like, well, it doesn't affect you.
Yeah.
And it's like, but it's stated like as if that's like serious. Like that's
Yeah.
really how I would base my views, is whether it immediately personally affects me or not. It's like,
That's
no.
what confuses me about, I think, the way I view conservatives thinking, which is like
Yes.
it's just about me and my independent rights. And this was talking about with the chariot. It's just like, if it's just about your individual rights, then what are we doing in a government?
Right. Right.
Ugh.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, and that is what's interesting about the Nine of Pentacles coming up on my end is like, anytime you're dealing with someone where it's like, okay, they're creating like there's problems here in this dynamic or whatever, and this
Yeah.
is the issue I have with them. Like we'll say that they're a narcissist or something, and you're feeling less than, put down, you're being
Yeah.
abused in that situation, whatever it is. It's like, in some way, there's maybe a way that you're needing to get in touch with a healthy narcissism within you.
Yeah.
And that's why you encountered this. And so it is kind of funny that it's like the recommendation for those of us who are concerned about this issue is the Nine of Pentacles. Like the Nine of Pentacles is something that the conservatives have down pat. Like
Yeah.
they got
Oh
it.
yeah. They
They're
got that
good.
one.
Yeah, even if they aren't really actually living the Nine of Pentacles life, they are feeling it, they're good.
Yeah.
And yet the leftists, many times, that's not our energy. That's not that is never our energy.
When it should be.
Right. Exactly, when it should be. So that's maybe the other thing with that hanged man switch of perspective is
Yeah.
like, in what ways can we still hold the ideals that we do, advocate for them, push for them, and also treat ourselves as if we were conservatives in our day-to-day life?
Yeah. It's just not who we are. I mean, I'm such a
Right.
collectivist.
I know. It's like
really hard. Like I would like even my purest desires are never for like something just for me.
I know.
So like, oh, give all Latina mothers like $2,000 a month or something like that.
Right.
Just doesn't, it's I would never think that way,
Right, exactly. Well, yeah, it's funny. I was actually just talking to one of my old mentors, Catherine, today, and like I was saying to her about like before I started working with her, like I felt like working with her for a long period of time, like I did, it really started to change how I did things. And one of the things was like, yeah, before I started working with her, I had already like finished grad school and stuff like that. Like I did those things. But like when I became a social worker, I did it because I had dreams and vision for the world and for other people, which is fine and all well and good. And I still have that. But what it ended up becoming was I was in these positions where I was just exploited. And it was like basically like, well, you're a good person, so you'll do it. Like you'll work these long hours because you care about these people and all those sorts of things. And so it ended up being that because it was like this desire and vision that was for somebody else, and it didn't include me at all. I was just exploited. So like my vision was almost literally for me to be exploited for the benefit of the whole.
Right, and that kind of thing just makes you so sick and
yes,
worn out and burnt out.
Yeah, I was so burnt out. And so it's like now I feel like I'm starting to have a vision that is like the both and of like, yes, I have a vision for like my clients and the people I work with and the community, but I also have a vision for what this does for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
We have to say that to our clients.
Yeah.
Like, where are you in this vision of helping others?
Yeah. I love that. Ooh, that gave me chills.
Yeah.
I remember that one.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Yeah. Thanks. This was good. And we'll do it again.
I'm glad we're doing this again.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Thanks for listening to Centered with me, Angie Yingst. If you'd like to send me a question or comment about this show or any shows, you can send them to Angie@themoonandstone.com.